so much for your patience, everyone. Wow, lights. Hi, I'm Vera. Thank you for waiting. I want to talk to you about leadership in the creative industries. Not the easiest subject, so I really appreciate you all being here and waiting for it. And of course, a big thank you for KIKK for having me and giving this topic a stage. I work as a consultant in creative strategy and creative operations, so I'm helping teams either on projects and concepts or in organizing themselves. Before I started doing this, I co-founded an independent creative studio called Field.io, grew it to a team of 25 in London and Berlin, and ran it until last year as a managing director and strategist. I'm very curious about how teams and organizations work, about how communication and personal interactions affect the creative process. And anyone who has ever switched from one team into another would probably agree they do affect it a lot. And a lot of people who would probably not call themselves as such are, in fact, leaders. And they have a big influence on the people that they work with. And if you're in the audience and you don't think of yourself as a leader, or maybe you're not super senior yet, what we'll look into will obviously be relevant for everyone because communication is a two-way street. Since I started working independently, I've had the opportunity to look into a range of different teams through the projects that I joined. And besides that, I've started reaching out to creative founders, artists, creative directors, started mentoring a few of them, work on strategy and positioning together. And with many others, I just had really nice, long conversations with individuals both much younger than me and much older, in creative and project management roles, in corporate, medium-sized, small independent environments, and in various pockets of the creative industry, from graphic to interior design, digital art and experiences, from marketing to design recruitment, from games to media arts and culture. Quick side note, in my talk today, I'll be featuring some of them, creatives that I admire, that I work with, as well as some of the sources that I'm quoting from. And you'll see that all of them have a big credit sitting across the frame. So please do take your phones out, take a snap, look them up later. And if anybody wants a full list of sources, just drop me a message later. Sorry, that was too slow, wasn't it? They'll come back. So, during all of these different impressions and conversations, a few patterns started to emerge. A lot of people told me about very similar challenges that they are struggling with when it comes to their teams, their peers. Do we still have a signal? Yes. Bit of a warning there. When it comes to their peers, their teams, the people they were leading, and also their clients. I started asking them how they deal with it, and I started taking notes and read more about it, sorted all of my notes into a glossary. And this is the list of keywords so far. A long, growing list of soft factors, soft forces, that have an incredible impact on creative work. So the handbook that I'm talking about today is not a book in the strict sense. It's this, it's a compendium. It's a compendium of notes, learnings, strategies from a wide network of contributors, including also advice from a number of books, articles, podcasts, translated to creative practice. And it wants to be not more than a thought starter, provide inspiration, awareness, also tangible advice for how we can create in collaboration in a positive and supportive way. Let me start with a few observations. The creative industry, I would say, is a grassroots industry. Innovation comes to a good extent from small independent groups and individuals who are often bolder, more experimental than, for example, big agencies. They're independent, agile, more willing to take risks. So small studios and independent artists are a really important driver that is not to be underestimated. When independent founders grow a team of 5, 12, 20 people, these teams typically don't have a lot of processes or defined workflows, if you like. It's the kind of team sizes that will just about manage to organize themselves. And of course, most founders start building a business and a team from a creative background, not a management background, myself included. In larger organizations, in contrast, creatives often become leaders just by seniority, not because they love leading others. But there's one more observation that I think is the most crucial one. Creative work strives for excellence, and it's focused on the end result. Exceptional output justifies maybe not anything, but a lot. How you get there is not intrinsically what we concern ourselves with as creatives. And along the way, we may be tolerating things that are not ideal, that are maybe even a bit hurtful. We may be seeing things that are not going well and justify them with, or subordinate them to the end result if it is outstanding. So not by design, but by accident, you might even say by consequential damage, the creative industries may be, just maybe, more prone to difficult behaviors than others. It might be that creative work environments are unnaturally tolerant to toxic behavior. And this culture of forgiving bad habits, I think, is an urgent need of improvement. When faced with unfair or even toxic or abusive behavior in creative teams, the one coping mechanism I heard and observed a lot of individuals go for is to pick their battles. Maybe withdraw from the situation, have a little laugh, push it to the side, and very often also questioning themselves. Is it really worth bringing up? Is it worth the argument, the stress that I'm putting myself under, the negativity? Is it even justified? Am I just being silly, overly sensitive, stressed from something else maybe? If I just chill out for a moment, just put it aside, I'll be fine. Is it going to have consequences? Am I going to be seen as unprofessional, not resilient enough, as bitchy? We all know these doubts, I think, and downplaying the situation is a coping mechanism a lot of people revert to, choosing to withdraw themselves from the situation rather than speaking up and facing a potential conflict. And I can tell you, as a team leader, I really struggle when team members do not come up to me with anything that is bothering them, because I have no clue about what's going on, no chance to support or to intervene. Without input and feedback, leaders can't lead. So when you're giving it, always consider it a favor to the other person. Because when you withdraw, when you keep things that bother you to yourself, you're missing the opportunity to create accountability for yourself and for others. And you're doing neither of these people a favor. I'm saying this so clearly to remind myself, because for me, this doesn't always come naturally either. What does accountability mean literally? In some companies, it means performance reviews. Some people use it for financial controlling. I mean it in the very literal sense of, you can count on me to do what I said. So simply, responsibility and holding your word, being accountable for what you said. Imagine there's something bugging you. Let's say you've been promised to take charge of the next project of a certain kind. And the months go by and the opportunity simply isn't given to you. After you've asked gently once or twice, you might grow tired of bringing it up. At times you might be more understanding again, think that maybe the right project for you simply hasn't come around yet. You might know the company might have bigger problems right now. But the longer it goes on, the more resentful you will grow of your team lead, of other team members, and possibly at some point, you will start thinking about leaving. But that's going to be a really hard decision to make because you don't really have any parameters for it. And you think you've made yourself really clear, but have you really? You'll find yourself umming and ahhing about it. Your mood will change week by week. I know people who have chewed on decisions like this for years. Imagine instead, you have been so clear in your communication that about what you expect, that you can be absolutely sure even 6 months after the conversation that you've made it super clear that you want a chance to lead a project and that it's so important to you that you will look elsewhere for that chance if you don't get it here. Now, let's say you'll never get that chance to lead a project. When promises are not held, although they've been very clearly communicated, then the decision to leave will be so much easier, and it will be easier to leave on good terms, which is what we all want in the end. Because it won't be personal, it'll be about facts. And of course, this again goes both ways. The decision to let someone go from your team, which is one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do, right? It'll also be a lot easier if you have parameters that you can derive your decision from, and it's not about personal things. Even when you hesitate to appear too demanding in either of the two roles, it will save you time. It's worth giving yourself that little extra push that you need to be super clear in your communication, even if it means you might displease someone in the moment, or that you won't get the job, or lose an opportunity. I'm still finding this very hard myself, but I learned the most about it with clients. When I discussed scope, budgets, timings with clients at the beginning of a collaboration, I want them to like me in that situation. I want that project. I might even need it. There's an imbalance of powers. There's a dependency. But if I'm setting the expectations wrong in this moment, it will be my team who will bear the brunt a little further down the road. And knowing that has often helped me find the strength to say no when something was off. Drawing a picture of the worst possible outcome can help make your communication as clear as possible. A lack of accountability in a team leads to a climate of futility, a term suggested by Catalyst, a US-based nonprofit that offers research and solutions for promoting women in the workplace since the 1960s already. And they define a climate of futility as the sense that efforts to make change are not welcome and will not have the desired impact. In a study from 2022, so very recent, Catalyst names a climate of futility as one of the 3 negative climates organizations can have that prevent men from speaking up against sexism. This is just a very specific example, but a very powerful one, I think. That a climate of futility, the absence of accountability, the feeling that when I speak up, it won't have any impact, is the foundation for many, many things to go wrong, and something that I think creative leaders need to be very mindful of. Let's have a little breather. Here's a beautiful new piece of work by Data Projects in collaboration with photographer Laetitia Dumais. And Data Projects is a female-led studio for digital image making, whose work and people I really love because they're really finding their own ways of doing things as a team, and I think you can see that in their work. This is Fata Morgana. I want to talk about bias and diversity. There are numerous studies that show that diverse teams are more productive. But why is it so hard to build them? Because homogeneous teams feel more effective. Because it's easier, more comfortable to deal with people who are more like you. It's frustrating. So the only way to change that is to get very literally out of your comfort zone and confront your own biases. A recent study published by Fast Company looked at reasons why women are less likely to be selected for leadership roles. And it offers some ideas how we can actively fight bias and discrimination on any level, not just gender. Very often when we're, for example, rejecting a candidate for a role, we're arguing on a factual level, such as they don't have the right experience. The study found that women are seen as unfit for leadership roles because they were never quite right, considered either too young or too old to lead, having too much education or not enough, because they were single, married, or divorced. Introverted women were not seen as leaders, and extroverted women were seen as aggressive. And although these critiques are unjustified enough in themselves, they're just camouflage for an underlying bias, because these considerations were not made in the study about male candidates. The study found that this surface-level critique functions as a red herring, as a self-deception, something we use to distract ourselves from our own bias. So we pretend we have factual reasons so that we don't need to admit it to ourselves. And I think this is very relevant for creative teams, because portfolios being so subjective, we will always find a red herring to distract ourselves from the fact that we might be biased against someone. Not just women or men, but any marginalized group or minority. In fact, anyone who is different from yourself. But we do want more diverse teams, right? So how can we catch ourselves in the moment? There's a simple trick called flip it to test it. Just mentally flip whoever you're dealing with for someone else to test yourself. If it feels weird, you might want to check on your own bias. Let's translate this to creative teams, and I've taken some very obvious examples to show you how this works. With that cute look, our clients won't take him serious as a creative director. It's probably not something you would say about a male applicant. I doubt that French accent would ever deliver a great pitch. Give it a try next time you have a chance. I think it's really powerful. And what I can say from my own failures is, building a diverse team takes real effort. Wanting it is not enough. Wanting it is not a commitment. It takes money, time, leaders' time, and risk. You have to commit to it for the long run. You have to try people out. You have to confront your own bias. And it might be less comfortable, but it's worth it. From a very smart HR team, I recently learned that they are not hiring for cultural fit. They're looking for cultural add. Isn't that a great distinction? I love that. You don't want to build a team of people who all look similar to you and have similar backgrounds and views, because you'd very likely be confirming each other much more than challenge each other, and challenge is where the magic happens. The next artwork I've brought also does a flip by showing the female body for a change through the female gaze, and these are excerpts from Spora by Lucy Hardcastle and Macy Cousins. But let's come back to bias once more. What can you do from the other perspective when you find yourself a recipient of bias? I found some really good advice on this from an author called Kim Scott, that some of you might know, who developed a framework called Radical Candor, which I'd really recommend reading. It's a guide to giving honest feedback from a place of caring without either becoming destructively aggressive or so friendly that you're actually doing more harm than good. In her article about bias, the first thing she writes about is how to distinguish bias from prejudice and bullying. As a recipient, bias is not meaning it. It's often unconscious. Prejudice is meaning it. It's a conscious belief. And bullying is simply being mean. She writes, if it's bias you're confronting, use an I statement to invite the other person to understand your perspective. The easiest I statement is simply a factual correction. For example, I don't think you're taking me seriously when you're calling me darling. To be clear, it's not your job to educate the person who just harmed you. But you may choose to do the work because saying something may cost you less emotionally than remaining silent. So these are just suggestions to help you push back in a way that minimizes the harm for you and perhaps prevents it from happening again, or even improves the relationship with that person. If that's what you want, then an I statement ensures you're not calling the other person out. It's a very generous response to someone else's unconscious bias. So also something that is less of a hurdle to say in a group, which I always found very difficult. An I statement is also a good way to find out where the other person is coming from, like a test. If they respond politely or apologetically, it will confirm that you're indeed dealing with an unconscious bias. If they double down or go on the attack, then you know you're dealing with prejudice or bullying. And to go along with this, the next artwork is by Ariel Tingwei Lu about bias amplification in AI. She told me that when she started reading about bias in AI, she was reminded of her own experiences and the bias treatment she received because of the way she looks, speaks, and behaves. And obviously that is something we don't want to see amplified and spiral out of control as more and more parts of our world are becoming automated. When I think of divesting talent from toxicity, then I first think of working for bad clients. For example, fossil companies, big polluters. If that's what you're thinking of as well, and you want to skill up about it, then mark down this name, Creatives for Climate, a nonprofit global network of creative professionals dedicated to climate justice, and they offer a ton of learning resources and just launched a couple of weeks ago a program for agencies of all sizes to commit to climate justice, so do give them a check out. But divesting talent from toxicity should also apply to difficult clients. When you're thinking about accepting a job, a booking, a project, I would really strongly suggest that you make soft factors as important as the factors we typically weigh up: time, budget, how interesting is the brief. Soft factors, such as how the relationship is, which level of bullshit you're going to have to tolerate when you do this project, whether or not you support the style of leadership and creative direction of your client from as much as you will have seen by that point, obviously. Why? Because these soft factors will cost you real hard money. Worst case, they will cost you money very quickly, when your margin disappears in more than accounted for revisions, feedback cycles, escalation calls, hand-holding your team because they're being bullied, or having to jump into something you thought you could delegate. Or best case, it will cost you the slow, creeping death of frustrating your team and possibly not even realize why people are starting to leave. And the most challenging part is you have to do it fast. With every day you spend, unpaid or paid, you will be more invested in the project and feel like you have to go through with it. Some of the decisions I regret the most are when I did not follow my gut feeling about stepping out of a project that sounded good on paper, because I felt in my gut that the relationship, the trust and alignment with the client was not strong enough or even showed some traits of toxicity. I regret them not because I'm such a good person, but because I paid for them, not once, but multiple times. You lose your team or collaborators, and if you don't lose them, you will frustrate them, you will lose their trust and their respect, and then eventually you will lose them. But also, you won't enjoy the work, which pretty certainly means that you won't be doing a very good job, which means you'll have spent time on something that you won't want to put in your portfolio, and that won't be working for you in getting the next project lined up, and that is paying twice. So it's not about being a snob or a softie or not strong enough to see something through to the end. Those are lies. It's about the price you pay that nobody talks about. So these are some very hard factual reasons why standing up for yourself, for your values, for the way you're working, is not some fluffy ideal, but it's very existential. You're probably already seeing that this all comes down to a very simple thought. Communication is just as important as ideas. Before ideas take form, words are one of the best vehicles we have to connect with each other about ideas. And that's a fragile moment in the process. We have to be precise, intentional, and careful with our words. Communication is the grease that makes things gel. Nobody does outstanding work when they're not feeling valued, not feeling in their strength, whether you're an artist, a producer, or an accountant wrangling a messy team's finances. Because creative work is like giving a little piece of your soul each time, and we need to treat that with care and with kindness. Thank you. Thank you so much.